the premise of the book obviously is just simply about motivation and what drives human behavior. And, that's where ever since I started reading about Simon Sinek, these kind of books are really interesting to me, to really understand the psychology of just business and human behavior and how those two intersect. So that's where I got a big kick out of it. And that's where I love the book. Actually, I thought it was one of the best books we read this year. So I'm like completely on the opposite side.
Well, that's great. I'm so glad. That's what makes the world go round.
Yeah, because the Tony Robbins book that I didn't contribute on, like that was a chore for me. Like that was hard. I mean, it was long, but it was hard. I mean, that could have been done like in 200 pages instead of like 500. In any event, so he talks about a couple different theories, but the premise of the book was people are more successful when they can identify when three elements can come into play within their work life. One is mastery, the other is autonomy, and the other is purpose. And if you can pull those three elements together, it's been his experience that you're going to be successful with it in any task or that you will undertake. There are some very real examples that I can pull from that I've seen in my career that directly correlate to this book. And one of them specifically is, I think he talks about in chapter 2, when he's identifying the, where is it? I'm trying to find my place here. He talks about in chapter 2, when he's talking about the different, how different scandals and misbehavior can lead to certain outcomes. And the mall business, I can relate this to mall business. We've always had an issue with tenants opening and closing on time, or following what we would consider to be the rules and regulations of our shopping centers. And we always use this carrot and stick approach. And if you don't open on time, we'll fine you $50. If you don't open again, we'll fine you $100. If you don't open again on the third time, we'll whatever the case may be, and it escalates. Well, think about it. You do it once, it's an accounting nightmare. It's an administrative nightmare, and it doesn't work. And
I'll bring up a good example since Beth's on the line. So I joined she hired me at Terra Nova in 2000. And so I was a junior leasing guy, and and she had the toughest time getting her leasing team to do activity reports. And so I remember, I think I was like, I don't know, maybe like 9 months in or something like that, or a year in. She says, look, if you don't get your leasing activity report in on time, I'm going to fine the entire team like $100 each or something. So she kind of made this, I guess that would be the carrot and the stick that you're talking about. But, a lot of the leasing agents said, yeah, $100, I can afford it. If that's all it costs, great. That means I'll just pay the $100 and I have more time to procrastinate. But, I was I was making, $25,000 a year. I was like, I can't afford that. So I remember hunting down every single one of the leasing agents and getting into verbal altercations with them. And to the point where I think Beth had to, change it, or else there'd be probably a fight in the office or something.
Mutiny. Yeah. Go ahead. Finish your thought on that though, Greg. Back to the mall thing for a second.
Well, and so it never worked. And we always found out that the more we find, one, we never really collected. And secondly, the behavior never changed. So I forwarded this book to one of my old GMs here in Houston. And I said, you have to read this, because it perfectly correlates to what, and she and I work together on this. So that's the reason I forwarded to her. Directly the behavior that we were trying to correct and what we were doing was actually making it worse. And we have documentation that shows it on the more we find, the worse the behavior became. And so it just was, this is why it was so eye-opening. This is why I kind of enjoyed the book, because I could easily correlate it to real life experiences that have happened, not just in my career, whether it be in the last year or so, but I can go back. I mean, there's multiple examples that I can pull from in my career that this book really speaks to. So I mean, that's the reason I got so much out of it.
I mean, look, I think that internal motivation and drive to do the right thing, we all want tenants and employees to do that. Right? But
Correct.
you've got to figure out, you've got employees, or, we ourselves have jobs to do and may not have the mastery. I agree. I think that if you have the autonomy, that you will do better than being micromanaged. No one likes to be micromanaged. No one, right? No. So people, you're like, did you hire me? If you don't think I can do the job, then let me go. But I just think back to the asset managers I had in my prior life or in right now, even partners, right? If I have a partner who's calling me and well, did you call this person? Did you call that? Like, oh my God, you're not investing with me anymore. Like, leave me alone. I can do my job. And if you don't think I can do my job, then stop investing with me. Or or in the case of being an asset manager, then hire a different company, because no one likes to be, and all those of us here that supervise people. I mean, when I try to follow up and ask Josie about stuff, no one likes to be micromanaged. But so I think that the point is, Hugh manages a lot of people. Have managed a lot of people in my life. I think that what this was kind of eye-opening to me is, if they're not motivating themselves, they're in the wrong seat on the bus.
Right. Exactly. And that's where
I don't think we can change their motivation.
No. And we ended up, you hate to do this, but we ended up having to make an example of somebody to show other retailers what would happen. And we pinpointed something that was just he was a chronic issue, and we made a very exaggerated example of what can happen. And I mean, we put stuff on them. I mean, it was over, but we had to do it because we showed them, instead of fining them, we showed them what could happen. It's like, look, yeah, you can lose $100, that's fine. But what if you lost your entire business today? What if your doors were shut forcibly by a landlord because you didn't follow the rules? So now only you have no income. You have zero income today. So your $100 issue has now turned into $1 million problem, because
that's a big stick.
It's a big stick.
I think it's not a stick. It's actually, I'm a mom of a 5-year-old, so I see the correlation of parenting to what you're talking about, because what you're demonstrating is not a stick, it's a natural consequence to their decisions. And that's a big difference as like, just, fining versus, and I do the same thing with my daughter. It's like, I empower her to make a choice, but she has to experience the natural consequences to her decisions. So I think that's just kind of what you're talking about. I see the correlation perfectly with parenting.
Yeah, running a mall business is like running a kindergarten class.
I have a kindergartner.
Same thing with running a leasing team. That's the funny story about the activity reports. One of the young leasing agents stood at my door and said, "What are you going to do? Fire me?"
Oh, that's good.
Did you fire them?
Please tell me you did.
Consequences.
I think I fired myself about 30 days later after that.
Yeah.
Well, going back to micro, it's funny because I'm very much into predictive index. If I don't know, I'm assuming everybody on the call knows predictive index. But
Yeah,
as I'm listening to some of these books, I'm like, this is like totally, they're not taking into account, someone with a high D or a high C, because some people like to be micromanaged. Some people actually don't like it when you say, think like an owner and be autonomous, and they just get, they're like, no, I need structure. I need a box.
sure.
I need to be micromanaged to the point where I know exactly that I'm doing it right. And then after that, then I'll just do it that way every time. And
True.
And he speaks to that to a little bit. It basically, and it depends on the task is at hand. There is a right way where the carrot and stick thing actually works best. That's a motivator for he called it rudimentary tasks, whatever it would be. If it's like, stocking a shelf or cleaning the house or whatever, whatever those tasks may be, he talks about those specific tasks having a different motivator than something that even remotely uses some sort of cognitive ability. When you increase the cognitive ability to complete a task, that's where the motivations change and they become more intrinsic versus extrinsic, which is
also like right brain thinking versus left brain thinking, right brain creativity, because he wrote another book, A Whole New Mind, all about the right brain and creativity and all of that. So it's the same kind of thing. So what you're talking about, something that's very like rational, logical, step-by-step process that takes no creative thinking at all, versus something where you really need to be in flow to be your best.
Right. And he discusses that where, where, and some of his TED Talks, he talks about where what science knows best and business isn't following, or I forget how he describes it. But in theoretically, business is not following what science is telling us. And, he talks about, he goes through, talks about, income for jobs, for different tasks and different jobs at hand, and goes through saying like, well, money isn't so much money is a motivator to a certain point.
Short term
to a certain point. If your job, if you consider your job to be paid fairly, like if you're paid fairly and if you're a certain job today, that's a baseline. But to go over and above that, that's where this mastery and autonomy and purpose comes into play. That's where you're able to take your productivity to a different level. It's not going to be because of they offer you a 30% bonus, or they offer you this, they offer you that. It's because you have that freedom to go and push yourself further, not because somebody told you, but because you have it in your, it's an internal clock, an internal mechanism in you, in your brain that says, I'm going to go do this, and I'm going to do it, and I'm going to meet this sort of level because that's what I want to do, because that's what I feel obligated in my own, my own psyche. I feel obligated to do that to go forward. That's the part what I thought was really interesting.
Two quotes in the book. Living a satisfying life requires more than simply meeting the demands of those in control. Yet in our offices and our classrooms, we have way too much compliance and way too little engagement. The former might get you through the day, but the latter will get you through the night.
Mm-hmm.
I just had a call this morning with someone, a young man that I'm coaching that works for a very large company. And I just had this conversation with him because he's being compliant and he's not being creative. And he's fearful of speaking out. And I'm coaching him on that. And I'm hoping that he starts speaking out. Another one of the quotes I loved, this is one of the things that I actually started doing, like did it twice yesterday. Asking why can lead to understanding, but asking why not can lead to breakthroughs.
Mm-hmm.
That was my favorite part of the book. to be in a meeting or to be looking at an asset or to be, working through a problem and saying, why not? And that goes, how many months and years in this book club have we talked about limiting beliefs? It's the number one problem in our world today, that everyone stops at, well, they're going to think it's crazy or that's impossible. Everyone, it is a huge problem we have in our world, in the business world. And they talked about this with parenting too, they said, children who are praised for being smart often believe that every encounter is a test of whether they really are. So to avoid looking dumb, they resist new challenges and choose the easiest path. By contrast, kids who understand that effort and hard work lead to mastery and growth take on more challenges and are willing to risk difficult tasks.
Growth mindset versus fixed mindset is the mindset book that they referenced. I think is really powerful.
So powerful. So instead of why, and that's a blaming question. Why did that happen? Or why, but just when you're brainstorming a problem, well, why not? Why couldn't we do that? Why not? Why not? Why not? Why not? Why not?
It's an engagement. Yeah, you can blame something, which is a finite answer, but when you ask why not, it forces you to be engaged, which is, it's interesting because it goes back to what Chris Voss has always said. It's like, look, go get the no. You want the no, because the no will give you, the no forces people to be engaged in the conversation that you're having at that point in time. So yeah, it's pretty powerful.
Can't get what you don't ask for.
I had on my cork board for more than a decade, why not me? And that was just on a and a question mark, and on my above my desk for probably 15 years or so until I moved. And yeah, it's definitely a good question.
Why not me?
Right. So if I ever said, it's like, well, why can't I do that? Or why not me? Why can't I be there?
And there you are as the president.
See someone in St. Bart's like, oh, that looks good. Why not? Why can't I? Why not me?
Awesome. Barry, are you available to chat or no?
Yeah, no, I'm taking a walk while listening.
All right. Did you read the book?
I did not. I read To Sell is Human by Daniel Pink, and I'm a big fan of his Pinkcast. If anybody subscribes or doesn't subscribe to that, I'm a big fan of that. But no, I did not read this book, so I'm kind of listening and enjoying the discussion.
I've never heard of the Pink test.
It's his weekly email. He sends out a weekly email. If you just go to danielpink.com or Google it, I like it a lot. It's just like a very short little 60-second video he sends out once a week. Yeah, it's very thought-provoking. I like Daniel Pink a lot.
Similar to Hardy.
He loves Hardy too.
Hardy.
Yeah, similar.
He had two quotes that I highlighted about selling, since we're all in the sales business. He says, to sell well is to convince someone else to part with resources, not to deprive that person, but to leave him better off in the end. So obviously, if we can lease someone some space to open a business, that should better him off in the end. But I also liked this one that says, don't upsell, upserve.
Yeah.
I love that. Don't upsell, upserve.
Over kind of comparing McDonald's to Chick-fil-A to a degree. I'm thinking like, if you want fries with that versus upserve at Chick-fil-A.
Absolutely.
Your Halloween to Party City.
There you go.
There you go. There you go. But it's, how do he says, find out what drives your employees. Most of our most of the economy is doing it exactly the opposite way, exactly what he says is wrong. Short-term financial rewards that in a short-term basis will motivate someone, but not in the long term. And I think that it goes back to that if they're not motivated, like, look, Hugh's got people on his team that are absolutely motivated internally and intrinsically, right? You've got a young lady and a young man on your team that it wouldn't matter if you gave them a short-term bonus or not. They're going to be as motivated and driven as they were if you didn't do that.
Yes.
Exactly, right? So, but it's hard as a leader to figure out who those people are, and and I mean, I think that sometimes you have people that are competitive and they like the games or the challenges, but that's more for like, okay, we're coming on last quarter, year end, we want to get a few more leases signed. I mean, I think those are just short blips and not for long-term drive and motivation, which is what he talks about.
Well, and it's self-serving. If you're simply trying to get these deals done so you can get an additional commission check at the end of the year, that serves yourself short term, but does it serve the client whom you're working with? Like, does it serve that tenant in that specific business? Like, did you put them in the right position for success 1, 2, 3 years from now for you to get that commission check by the end of the year? That's a hard one. And I reflected that when I was with Brookfield, and like the deals that we were making, you could see just had complete short-term impacts on them. It was great for 6 months, but it had no benefit long-term, and the property suffered for it. I mean, there's countless examples, countless.
I mean, I think that asking the question, what drives you, is a great interview question. So we're creating a property management company right now for our shopping centers, and we have done calls with people to see who's going to be our bookkeeper, who's going to, take care of the maintenance, that type of thing. And I wish I would have asked those questions this week, because they seem motivated, but are they just selling themselves well on the call? But it's a good thing, like whoever we decide to hire, to know that. So you speak to that motivation and that drive, so you can properly work together.
Yeah, and I think it's important when you're interviewing to follow up with questions like that when they say, well, this is what drives me. Can you give me an example?
Yeah, definitely.
Because they all know the right thing to answer to some of those questions, but give me an example of when you put that into practice. That's what I do. I did, like, last 2 weeks ago, I had 15 mock interviews with some students from Florida State from like 8 in the morning until 4. It was like crazy, a long day. But every time I asked them, well, one of my favorite questions is, do you have a best friend? And they go, yeah. Like it gets them off, they're like, what does that mean? I go, how does your best friend describe you in 3 adjectives? And then they tell me, hardworking, determined, and, ambitious or whatever. And then or creative. And I'll say, well, do you agree with those? Do you agree with what they think about you? And they, sure. And then I go, well, give me an example of hardworking. And then if they give me an example, well, I was on this team and we were going after this case award and we were up all night and this happened and this happened. And it's a very specific example. But a lot of times they can't come up with examples. First, they can't think on their feet, which is a very important quality in our world, right? In selling. But then they're just kind of using the adjectives that they think that you want to hear, that they don't have a specific example for.
I think knowing what your drive is really important when something gets hard. I think that's super important. Like, I really feel intrinsically motivated to be successful in real estate, and I revisit that every day, but there's always parts of the job that are like, frustrating or don't play to your strengths, then you need to kind of like figure it out. So you can get through those hard times because you are internally motivated and you aspire for these things because you're purpose driven, or you enjoy the autonomy of your day and you keep that autonomy. You know, you're not a slave to something because you can stay autonomous. I think just as supervising someone, it's also keeping yourself intrinsically motivated so you can be more successful.
Absolutely. I mean, I can't stand the paperwork part of our job. The detail oriented, reading the leases, reading the purchase and sale contracts. Absolutely. I avoid it at all costs, which is why I outsource it, but I still have to be involved. Versus I love the teaching part of my job. And there are people that are the opposite, hate the teaching part, love the detail part. That's what makes the world go around. But you know, what Gary Vaynerchuk says, self-awareness is the most undervalued skill set ever. You need to know who you are and what you're all about, and you know what your purpose is, and what you are motivated to have mastery in. Like I would never want to have mastery in contract revisions. I don't care. Just get someone else do it and get it done. But there's people. Do you like detail, Hugh?
I'm not. I don't like detail.
You
Well,
don't either?
my PI actually is not. I mean, I have to I have to, you know, focus on detail to do my job properly. But no, I mean, if I didn't have to, I, you know, wouldn't.
You try to outsource it 90% and you come in and just review it?
Yeah, I have Christina and Carson, you know, doing the detail. They're the high D, the high, you know, the on predictive index, the high D characters and my team. So they do a lot of stuff, and I, you know, have enough detail to be able to go in there and see if there's any adjustments that need to be made.
Barry, do you like doing detail work?
I am very detailed. I'm good at it. I don't enjoy it now, but I can do it real well.
Greg, what about you?
No.
Right.
Although I do like spreadsheets. I don't know if is that detail, because you know, my wife makes fun of me because I love spreadsheets. Like I'll put a spreadsheet together for everything.
If I have to be detailed, I can be to prove and it really is dependent on what it is. It's if I have to prove a point somewhere, but I can't stand it. Like I can't stand spreadsheets. I can't stand reading them, you know. And part of it could just be some mild ADD that I just don't have this time to just. But I'm pretty fluid.
I think liking spreadsheets means you're detailed, because I
like guess I'm detailed.
I like charts. I like looking at tenant sales and saying, do a chart. I tell Chloe, do a chart from, you know, 2017 till today. And I like looking at, like, real quick, a chart, you know, that's visual and is a graphic that's going to tell me up before, you know, over pre-COVID sales, under pre-COVID sales, you know, ramping up over the last 4 or 5 years, you know, whatever. I like charts, very quick, but I love looking at sales because I think that's so important. I noticed yesterday in one of my tenants, it's a nail salon, and at one point they were doing $2.8 million. This is pre-COVID. And the owner opened 2 more locations, and he's never at my store. And all of a sudden this week, and about 6 months ago, I said, are you going to come back to my store? And he goes, well, I'm trying to get these other stores open. I go, but you see what's happening with your sales, that you're not at the store, right? And he goes, yeah, you know, I need a new manager. All of a sudden this week, he's back at the store, and I texted him this morning and I said, I see you're back at the store. I mean, the sales are down 40 and 50,000 a month without him. Now, maybe it doesn't matter because he's working on the sales of these other 2 stores, but that is huge. That's a huge, I mean, I can't even imagine if I owned a business and my sales were down 40,000 a month. It's crazy. I have not, Nancy just asked about concessions. In South Florida, we are out of the concession business since about July of 2020, right, Hugh?
You could say that. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if anyone else, Greg, what are you seeing around the country? I mean, I don't know if it really applies to you, but were you able to get some really great deals this Halloween season in certain parts of the country?
Not, I think before Halloween, I think we were kind of status quo from the year before. Now, what I'm noticing is that a lot of the landlords, even last year, just had this just very unrealistic expectations of what their space was worth. So there really wasn't a whole lot of concessions going on. I mean, so the only way we were able to get better deals was we had to be very flexible, and we had to be a little bit more creative on what our footprint looked like. So if we weren't in a shopping center and we were in a warehouse space just across the street or down the street, then that's where we went. And so but no, at least in Texas or Louisiana, no, which is kind of interesting to think that even northern Louisiana and Shreveport, they're not giving away anything. I mean, rents are up 30, 40%.
Yeah, that's how it is in South Florida in most of the markets. Yeah. So a couple more quotes on the book. This is a good one. In the new world of sales, being able to ask the right questions is more valuable than producing the right answers, which is what I preach all the time. Don't show up and throw up, right? Unfortunately, our schools often have the opposite emphasis. They teach us how to answer, but not how to ask. So true, right? So true. Questions, people will text me or DM me and say, can you send me your scripts? I'm like, scripts? There's no scripts. You have to ask questions, listen to the answer, and then respond. You can't do that in a script. That is so counterintuitive to the selling process, unless you're selling maybe a copy machine. I don't know. I've done this for 35 years. So for me, it's never been about a script. There's certain questions you want to make sure, how many square feet, what's your use? Do you have any other locations? And then it's kind of, do you have any partners? Do you need a loan to open the business? How much does it cost it's just impossible to, in my opinion, have a script. Hugh, I'm thinking now, thinking back to your early days, you didn't really have a script, but you just had a list of questions, right?
In terms of negotiating, or in terms of prospecting, or no,
I
mean,
say
when I was
qualifying.
prospecting, I would have if I'm canvassing, I have not a script, but I just say the same thing almost every time. So, are you looking to open up any other locations or something like that? But as far as pre-qualifying, there's a set of questions. I don't know if I'm following word for word a script, but certainly, you have to hit your marks. And then, certainly in negotiations, no, I don't think that there, although I think at Woolbright, they had one of these coaches come in, Omar Periu. I don't know if you know him. He's in Boca. And he gave us a few closing techniques. And I don't know if you call those scripts, but, they were kind of prepackaged, things that you would say.
Did it work?
Sort of. I mean, so for example, I'll give you an example. One of the closings or objection responses that he said is, so pretend you're talking to a prospective lessee or prospective tenant, and you go in and you quote, "Hey, my rent's $25 per square foot," and the prospective tenant says, "That's too expensive." And then so you're supposed to say, Oh, okay. That's interesting. Is it that you can't afford it or you can't justify it? Because if you can't afford it because of your sales, that's one thing. But if you can't justify it because you think it, that's not the market, that's something else. And that's like the canned response. But it's also, you have those also. I mean, what are your sales, right? Okay, so then you kind of, so those, they're almost prepackaged responses. And I don't know if you call them scripts or not. I think I do, but I think they're helpful.
I think it's all about the questions. I get made fun of a lot in my office for asking. Some people routinely make fun of me for asking too many questions on calls or meetings, and I kind of laugh inside because I think it's all about the questions, not the presentation.
I agree. I agree. I mean, I do think that we have typical answers, right? For sure. That is, when people say I can't afford the rent, absolutely. I go to, well, what are your sales, or what are your projected sales? So I do think we have pat responses to the questions, but I do too. Whenever I do role playing, I have one person that I'm role playing with and another person that I'm saying secretly, I text them, count how many questions I ask. Because I'll ask, like Barry, I'll ask 30 or 40 questions in a negotiation. It's like, it's crazy, but that's how you get, I think, successfully to an end result.
That's what Chris Voss talks about. I mean, I was watching the videos, I think I posted on LinkedIn. I mean, mirroring it's just questioning. And I'm working on trying to improve my technique. And I enjoy listening to folks I consider like really good interviewers. Like, I'm into sports. I enjoy listening to Paul Feinbaum. If anybody knows him, he's really a great interviewer. He asks very casually, asks very good questions. And I enjoy listening to people like that that I think are expert at questioning, just to try to figure out their technique, where it's just casual, but very, very insightful and deep.
All right, so here's a few more quotes before we start closing out. I thought he talks a lot about breaks, Greg, taking breaks, right? Naps. So he says, high performers, research concludes, work for 52 minutes and then break for 17 minutes. I thought that was pretty aggressive. But I do think that taking breaks, taking walks, especially those of us sometimes that are still working from home, to get up and take a walk, go outside, get fresh air at the office, get up, take a walk to lunch, whatever. I don't know if every 52 minutes I'd take a break for 17 minutes. I'm not sure how much I would get done. But I do think that, and he says, elite performers have something in common. They're really good at taking breaks.
I've heard that before.
And one of the books we read recently, I don't remember which one it was, but talked a lot about when you work out your muscles, the time when the muscles grow is in the recovery period.
I think that's Darren Hardy. He's big with rest and recovery, and the need to push an athlete. The hard part pushing an athlete is the recovery, not the exercise.
So he says, you lift, your weights 10 times, and then you take a couple minute pause, that the muscles in the rest and recovery, that's when they're growing. And it's really, really important to have that recovery time. And he talked about in the 80s and 90s, it was the big deal. It says until about 10 years ago, we admired those that could survive only on 4 hours of sleep, and those that worked through the night. They were heroes. He said, then sleep science reached the mainstream, and we began to change our attitude. The sleepless guy wasn't a hero, he was a fool. He was likely doing subpar work and maybe hurting the rest of us because of his poor choices. Breaks are now where sleep was then. Skipping lunch used to be a badge of honor, and taking a nap a mark of shame. No more. The science of timing now affirms what the old world already understood. We should give ourselves a break. So I knew a guy that napped every day. This is like 20 years ago. I was in this group called Tech or Vistage, and every day from 3 to 3:30, he took a nap on his couch in his office. We used to tease him, but there have been times when I travel a lot on airplanes, like I'll work for like an hour and then I'll take a 15-20 minute nap and I wake up, I'm on a flight and I'm renewed for 15 or 20 minutes. I think I love naps. I say I always do the most productive thing at every given moment. And sometimes it might be a nap.
Bobby Bowden he used to say he had a couch in his office that he napped every single day.
I think it's, because otherwise sometimes you're exhausted and then you're not thinking clearly. So if there's a way you could take a little nap, I think that would be a wonderful thing. It's easier to do it when you're working from home, obviously. But also a walk outside, unlike today in South Florida, it's all dreary and rainy, but a brisk walk outside is refreshing as well. So anything else, Greg, to add on your favorite part of the book?
Only other story that I'll add is he talks about, kind of with, and I forget which section of the book it's in, and when he talks about the FedEx days and the 20% time, and Atlassian's the company, and they called these the FedEx days because they had to dedicate one day, a quarter, a month, whatever it was, but they could do whatever they wanted. As long as it was related to somewhat business related, it was just completely different from what they were currently doing. And they called it a FedEx day because they had to deliver it overnight. And they kind of parlayed that into 20% time. And so when I worked with DDR, when we had just bought all the malls in Puerto Rico, huge traffic generators for the island. And took one visit, and I'm like, boy, all these malls in the US, they've got these sponsorships, they have the advertising programs, they got all this stuff. Puerto Rico had none of it. No one told me to do it. No one did anything. I'm just I called a couple ad companies on the island. Lo and behold, we developed a $20 million sponsorship program just because it had nothing to do with my job, because we had a dedicated team to do it. But it was a $20 million recurring annual income for 15 malls in the country, in the island. And it all came about because of something else I took as kind of like a pet project. So, and I'm working on a pet project now for Spirit right now, in hopes we'll get something worked out. But yeah, that part just kind of really motivated. It really correlated.
2 days of Halloween instead of one.
Yeah, exactly.
It has to do with physical spaces. How can we set up a Halloween store not in a contiguous, not in an inline space, and it's temporary, and it's not a tent.
Interesting.
So I've got some ideas.
All right.
Reports.
3D printing. That could be one idea.
I'll add two things. One is I remember that one of my takeaways was on motivation, in that the if you do something, then you get this, seems to not be a good way to motivate. But when the person does something, now that you did this, then you get a reward, leaves a lasting impression. So when I think of bonuses and rewards and things like that, I try to follow, the more effective method. It's hard, it's harder to plan, but the surprises are definitely, longer lasting, leaves a pretty deep impression. I remember at Wolbright, I did a great job, and we were in Vegas one year, and then, we were all at the casino, and Mike Fimiani hands me $1,000 in chips. And one day he's like, all right. I'm like, I still remember that to this day. It was $1,000. I mean, $1,000 is, a lot of money, but certainly, is not like the size of a, like a $20,000 bonus or something. But
did you go cash it in and take the money?
Well,
there's no way you gambled that $1,000.
So I gambled 100 of it, and I think I was up $50 and I was like, all right, that's good. $1,050. Beth, you know me so well. And all right, so the next thing I'll do is I'm gonna share something I'm not able to share. Can you allow me to share?
Yeah. There's no way you were gonna, everyone needs to know their employees or their team members really well, because when you said he gave you $1,000, you were running to the, there's no way it would have killed you to gamble that money and lose it.
Yeah, absolutely. You know me. So one of the things that we touched upon was the reason, the purpose, right? And I try to put together like in leasing, when you sign a lease, it leads to a lot more purpose than people think. So I took the example, and I have this in my leasing handbook that I, when I onboard new leasing people, to try to just give them an idea of the magnitude of the effect of leasing space can be. It's not just, commission in their pocket or, one space filled. And so take an example. If you were to lease a 5,000 square foot space in a shopping center, call it $20 a square foot for a 5-year term, very, typical lease. So what does that do? Number one, on the ownership side, that's $100,000 of NOI to the property. That's great. That adds, $5,800 of sales tax revenue to the state of Florida, because they tax base rent. That adds $5,000 in annual management fees just from that one deal to the management company. It's the gross commission, obviously, but then it's also added $1.25 million of property value if you apply, an 8% cap rate, which is very high these days. But then you look into, the community side, and it could be 20 new jobs. And let's just say it's $35,000 an average income for the job. That's $600,000 more in added purchasing power to the local economy. And then those $600,000, that's maybe $100,000 in taxes to the federal government. So it's like this kind of, self-perpetuating success once you sign a lease. That doesn't end at just the commission. And in addition to that, if I have a strong leasing team, guess what? I can be more aggressive in my acquisitions. If I know I can lease up the shopping center in 12 months instead of 26 months, I'm gonna go maybe bid an extra $1 million and get the deal, versus get not bid out and not get the deal. And more acquisitions equals more leasing opportunities, more management fees, more leasing fees, etc. And then on the neighborhood side again, as you add these conveniences and the independent retailer awards, if you get the batch cookies, the Cali coffees and all these other guys, that the cool concepts, you end up making the area that your property is in even more interesting. And then when you hit a certain threshold and magnitude, it becomes really interesting. Like look at Wynwood, right? I mean, Wynwood, no one lived there, and there was a bunch of bars that popped up, and then more people started going there, and it became more interesting. And now the rents that you pay in Wynwood are more than what you're paying in South Beach in some cases. And so it can kind of self-perpetuate value, income, and then fees and everything else.
I love this.
This is fantastic.
Fantastic. Do you remember what I used to say to you guys at Terra Nova? Who did we work for? Who did we work for?
Who did we
work for? Yeah, instead of working
Steven?
for, no. So instead of working for the pension fund advisors, I used to say, we need to get that extra $1 a square foot for the widows and children.
Ah, that's right. The widows and
children. Because they would, you guys would come to me and you would say, oh my gosh, we beat the budget already. We don't need to go get the other dollar. And I would say, no, we have to go get the other dollar, because what we're doing is we're working for a pension fund advisor, and their money goes to fund the widows and children of their employees. And that was trying to take we're just not a third-party leasing company. We're trying to better the returns so that the widows and children could get their benefits. So I would always say, we're not working for Heather, the asset manager, we're working for the widows and children of the pension fund.
In that case, I'm working for Jack's kids and their college tuition.
That was awesome, Hugh. So awesome.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, no worries. And you can even go further. It's like, it can be, right? It's like all the little things, right? Then the supplier, if you do a restaurant, then you're helping the suppliers and the truck drivers and the blah, 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 blah.
You can turn that into actually a leasing tool, because you can take that and modify it slightly and share that with a retailer or a restaurant and say, like, this is what, if we work these deals, these are all the different facets that we can do, that how it benefits the community and how it benefits your employees and everybody else. It really, it flips the script of what a traditional conversation between the landlord and tenant are that we've seen. It becomes a little bit more, it's a definite more engaging conversation, and it kind of hopefully creates a little partnership.
Well, I mean, really, who needs to understand this also are the cities. I mean, the amount of time that's held up and getting a tenant open is like crazy. I mean, in just our little portfolio, I mean, it's, hundreds, if not thousands of days across, all the tenants, right? And think of, how much extra tax revenue and tax space and salaries could have been created if they would have, sped things up by 30 days. Per deal on average. It's crazy.
Amen.
Yeah, I'm trying to get one of my tenants is trying to get a permit, and the electric inspector, the engineer, is wanting us to get 1 year of FP&L, Florida Power and Light bills for all of the tenants in the shopping center for the last year. I'm like, we're not getting that. Now what? We're not getting that. Crazy. So I have to go over his head.
Yeah. Look, and that's the, as powerful as leasing can be, and self-perpetuating, good things. Some of these city guys can do the same thing negatively, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh.
Too many times.
All right. So next month, we have our last book of the year before Greg takes over in 2022. There it is, The One Thing by Gary Keller, which did you hear? I downloaded the audio version and I start listening to it, and it was in Dutch. Somehow my finger moved and said I wanted it in Dutch. So, but now I have it in English, so it's great. So have you started reading it, Greg? Is it good? I've heard it's great.
It is. It's a pretty quick read. Like I'm
got to run, guys. It's been really fun. Have a great one.
Thanks, Hugh. Appreciate it.
Hugh.
Thanks, Hugh.
Yeah. So you're enjoying it? It's a quick read and you're enjoying it?
It's a quick read, and there's you could be able to supplement a lot of the information on YouTube. He's got some other talks and stuff as well, so should be.
I did that one on Audible too, Beth, as well. I finished it about a month ago.
I bet you didn't do it in Dutch.
I do speak fluent Dutch, but no, I did it in English.
Cool.
And I don't speak
I
a
know
word
a
of
few
Dutch.
words. I studied in Belgium.
I'm joking. I don't know a word of Dutch.
Oh, okay. I know. I know enough.
Very cool. Awesome.
All right, everyone. Have a great Thanksgiving, and we'll see you next month.
Yeah, whatever.
Okay.
See you guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.